This is the Little Calumet River Basin Development Commission podcast. Now here's your host, Dan Repay.
Good morning, everyone, and happy pre-fall. And September is a somber month for Little Cal because that's unfortunately the anniversary of the flood of 2008. And
what's your name?
My name is Tom Wichlinski. I'm the vice chairman of the Little Cal River Commission. I was getting to that.
I'm Bill Baker. I'm the chairman, have been since right after the flood in September of 2008.
We rarely still see our chairman here, but he's blessed us today because Mr. Repay, our executive director, is on assignment this morning. He's hosting a big meeting with a lot of different players at our new digs on Calumet Avenue.
Isn't it a bunch of bureaucrats coming in?
I didn't say that, you did, but that's okay. But we're out there. We're working hard. Bill has got firsthand experience of the devastation of 2008. He's been on the commission since 2008, and I was appointed in 2009, so I wasn't in the thick of it. And he lives in the Munster area that got affected by the flood and all the people that lost property. And
you know, that was a long time ago, Tom, and
17 years.
That was a challenging time, and it was to the point, at least in my opinion, that I couldn't believe at that point in our history something like that still had the possibility of happening. So, you know, everything, I say everything happens for a reason. I struggle with why that one happened because I can't figure out the reason other than the fact that nothing in the region changes unless there's trauma. And that's the perfect example of how things only change around here if there's something that's as devastating as $1 billion of damage to people's lives. The Borman Expressway, and we talk about it every day, what's going to happen with the modifications they're doing, closed for 4 days. I mean, it was
closed for 4 days.
If you were around here during that time, it was impactful to say the least. And it's a $275 million man-made flood control project set up by the Army Corps of Engineers dating back into the 80s. And it's an example, if you don't take care of something that's man-made, challenging things happen.
I don't think there was any, it just didn't seem like there was any, based on our looking at this thing from the 10,000-foot view, there was any push to get it done. And urgent sense of urgency to make things happen. And then, like you said, you had to have the trauma. And then we come in, and I'm not sitting there, putting halos on us, but we're asking questions as to why this is happening and why couldn't this stuff be done and maintain it. The sad thing was, you basically bought a car, but you don't have any money to maintain the car. It made no sense to us. It's just, some of the stuff was just crazy.
Well, unfortunately, regardless of the subject matter, in my opinion, you have to always talk about the money. And regardless of whether you're raising money or spending money or managing money, it's important in how that works, and to the point where every time for a local match, you had to go down to the General Assembly because nothing locally here was generating the funds to match the federal dollars. It just languished is the best word. And as it was moving through in segments, more and more development happened, more and more things happened. It was just a unfortunate situation to the point that, at least as long as I draw a breath, and Tom and the group that's been sitting on this since the flood, we're going to do everything possible to make sure that doesn't happen again. But you are managing Mother Nature. And we know how that goes, to the point where if we get 10 gallons of water for our 5-gallon bucket, similar to what we saw a couple of weeks ago, there's going to be some challenges. We're far better off today than we were prior to September 2008 in dealing with that, but nonetheless, it's still going to be a challenge. And then nobody's going to put focus on the river, because why does anybody care about the river? It's doing what it's supposed to, unless there's a situation like that, or we start having problems where the streets start flooding.
Or you have a beautiful day like today, and people don't even think about stuff like that.
No.
I mean, it was everything came together.
And they shouldn't have to. Life's hard enough.
In the perfect storm, you had a tornado, followed by multiple days of rain, and then the deluge came in September of 2008, and the water couldn't go anywhere. There was no place for it to go. And then combine that with the fact that there's drains and stuff that are clogged that never got cleaned out, and you're begging. The worst scenario was going to happen. It's just a sad reality. But the good news is, folks, the team
good news?
Yes, there is. The team that we have in place, and we sit down at meetings all the time. What kind of development's going on in South County? What tributaries are flowing into our system? How can we make sure that those are cleaned out and bettered to make sure that the water is flowing at all times, even in the worst case scenarios? The team is watching out. The team is, hey, like you always say, you could get 10 gallons of water in a 5-gallon bucket. Something's got to give.
And it's going to be a challenge. And, I think the Little Cal is one of the few groups, at least in my opinion, that kind of brings everybody in the region together for a common goal, because each community in the watershed, and there's 17, with 2 primary feeders into the Little Cal, being Hart Ditch on the west end and then Deep River on the east end, all have skin in the game. I mean, nobody wants to see their community and their constituents affected by something like the flood of 2008. I don't want to ever see that again. But everybody has to do their part. So what we try to do in kind of feeding off of the whole sports analogy around here is having them all engaged, have some skin in the game, have some decision making as far as what the plays are going to call, when we're going to call them, and how that's going to work. So everybody has a working knowledge of what's going to happen when we go through a situation like that. It's going to happen again when we get one of those storms like we saw a couple of weeks ago, but instead of the primary focus of all of that intense rain being along the lakeshore, what happens if it's along the Borman Expressway? I mean, that's a real world scenario to the point where we're modeling those types of things. We're going to try to have a strategic plan on where things are going to go, where the resources need to go to do the best that we can in managing a situation like that. I hope it's something we never have to deal with, but if we deal with it before it's trauma and everybody's basements and streets are starting to be challenged, at least we're going to be somewhat prepared in engaging those communities and everybody to work together to take care of the community. And at the end of the day, isn't that what this is all about?
Well, you also bring up we always talk about the benefits that result from what we've done as far as getting people out of the floodplain. And Dan Repay, who's our executive director, talks about it. He used to pay $1,200 a year in flood insurance just for his house in Schlacker. And when you eliminate that per year, folks, you're putting some serious money back into people's pockets. I mean, you always mention how many parcels that we've removed from
4,000
paying mandatory flood insurance. The number's going to add up quickly as that money went right back into those people's pockets. Not to mention, when you're paying mandatory flood insurance, your property value is depressed. And we saw it in Griffith after they finished the Katy Marsh Ditch project and the deep tunnel that connects Katy Marsh Ditch to the river. All those properties, or quite a few of them, got out of the flood zone, and the property values jumped up considerably because those people didn't have that extra $200, $300 a month on their mortgage payment to pay the flood insurance.
And we always do say as a tag on to that type of statement that if you're close to the river or any of those tributaries that we talked about, is you still should maintain some flood insurance, because you are still dealing with Mother Nature. It's not going to be as significant of a cost as it was when it was a part of your federally backed mortgage, but it's still something that you should highly consider as it relates to that, because you are close to a river and things do happen. So. But let's look at it less as a challenge and kind of, more evolved towards it being an asset for the community and how we can kind of enhance that to drive economic development as well as take care of some of our fundamental infrastructure programs.
And that flood insurance is at an extremely discounted rate, so it's very affordable to carry that on your mortgage or pay it on an annual basis. So, like you said, you're better off having extra they call it belt and suspenders, having the suspenders on to make sure in case there's a problem, I'm covered. I don't have to worry about that. And that's your major investment in life.
We live on a swamp. There's going to be issues. That's why we spend so much time on the pump stations and making sure there's backup generation and that equipment works, because anybody that's ever worked in a manufacturing facility or something of that nature, hell, even your house, that you got to take care of those machines and make sure that they're addressed, so when you need them, they work, because we all know when the generator's supposed to go on and it doesn't, what a challenge that is.
You never miss the water till the well runs dry, so to speak. No. One of the other things that we do, folks, is we work with a lot of different partners on so it's not only a flood project, it's also a recreational project, and we're always focused on that as well. Last year we repaved all the paths on the different levees, so people can ride, walk, push their strollers and things of that nature. And we work with the locals, the Audubon Society, local Audubon Society. We work with Lake County Parks. And if you're driving down, and I drive through there all the time, down Klein Avenue, and you look to the west there, you see this nice marshy area. That's the rolling, I call them weeds. But it looks beautiful. I mean, when the wind's kind of blowing, everything's kind of pulling over. And then there's a lot of cranes and birds there. So we've become a real sanctuary for birds, and
yeah.
You call them birds, the birds and the bunnies.
Yeah, and I'm from the region, so it's a little challenging to pay money for a flood control thing and start talking about recreational, but that was part of the original legislation that was passed for the federal government to bring that funding in. And one of the first things that we did was trying to hit two birds with one stone, pun intended, under the premise that we pave the top of the earthen levee, which is basically just a pile of dirt instead of having sheet piling, and call it recreation. But the real premise in starting that as one of the first projects was to be able to provide a path for equipment to be able to get to some of the more remote sections of the river, to be able to do the maintenance that we talked about earlier and do it in such an efficient way. Whereas prior to that, you'd be driving on wet, mud basically, and rutting it all out, trying to get out to some of those places. So we did that, and then as a part of that evolution, we started working into, as we did more and more projects, let's bring in a recreational environmental component to each one of those projects and just build it into that project to make sure that as we go, we get a little bite of the apple each time, and try to kind of tie it all together to the greater good. These guys are all very patient with me because I have this thing with an invasive species called Phragmites. And when you're driving around, you'll see them all over the place, because originally, if you don't look at it, go, oh, look, they're cattails, and they're really tall, and they got a little feather thing on the top, and it kind of looks like the old cattails from back in the day, but they're not. It's an invasive species that basically kills everything else as it continues to propagate. So you get more and more proliferate. Yeah, see, that's an IU term. But it's an ongoing challenge to the point where it's the same. You can't one and done it. You can't just cut them down or spray them. You got to continually manage it, folks. So that's why we work towards things with the partners, including INDOT, because one of the largest, I call them Phragmite farms, is INDOT and their interchanges, and also along the expressway. So as things move forward, we'll go and work with INDOT more and more now as things start to move into the next phase of the project and start working on some of those things. And you could see kind of the benefit of that. Tom mentioned the collaborative, and it's a cool thing. It's the Wetlands Initiative, it's the Audubon Society, Lake County Parks is involved with the Little Cal, and they use some of the dollars that we put into that to bring in more grant dollars to try to enhance the environment, because of a lot of the wildlife that stops here as a migration from a birding situation, but also to just enhance our environment to the point where, when you go out on the trails, there's something else to look at other than semi-trucks on the Borman.
You don't even know, some of these areas are remote, and you don't know you're even in the region when you're walking them, because of all the wildlife, the deers and the birds, and we've got at a certain point we've got migrating eagles that come every year, and that little family's getting bigger and bigger because they keep coming back and hatching more eaglets. But it's pretty exciting stuff.
Yeah, and and that's part of it, just enhancing the community as more of that things kind of ties in together, and it's an ecosystem. So hopefully, we get close to, tying in the Borman Expressway, and, anybody that sits there in the afternoon knows what that's like, versus something just over the side of the levee, something that's completely different, and provides the diversity that the region is well known for, and it's just another example.
And we're also working, one of our big partners is the Lake County Surveyor's Surveyor's Office and the Lake County Drainage Board, rebuilding basically Hart's Ditch, which hadn't been touched in years and years and years. And we're making some good headway there, and we're probably looking at a few more years to finish it all up. But
well, and that's a good point. The Hart's Ditch, for those, unfamiliar, and I'm trying to get away from ditches and cricks and, those types of things, but that's what they are, right? But, Hart runs along Wicker Park, so you could think about it from that side, and goes all the way past the hospital into Illinois, but that's also the most densely populated part of the system, so it didn't get a lot of attention, but as more and more water came down there was more and more erosion, to the point where it got to be so expensive, it was neglected. And it's been a multi-year project to start stabilizing those banks and put riprap down and trying to make sure that we at least bring it back to a point where it can be easily managed as a part of the operating system of the river commission. But you have to bring in the local communities to do that, as well as the residents. Sometimes you have leaner trees, and especially in Hart Ditch, and they fall in and they cause problems. Well, when we start taking them down, people get, "Oh, you're killing the trees." Well, we've had, probably a tree program we have a tree program for at least the last 10 years or so, to be able to start replanting as a part of that, because a lot of the trees we're taking down are cottonwoods, and those are just garbage trees, to the point where
Chinese elms,
those have to be replaced, but it takes a little bit of time, and we're trying, and that's why we work with the partners and try to have each of the communities be engaged in what they want to do and what they see that's important in the system, in their sphere of influence, and how it impacts everybody else, and put it in as a part of the updated comprehensive plan, so we're able to have some knowledge of what those local communities want, and start talking to them about how they feel about their budget, because we do all of these things where pick a community, Griffith, for example, and we'll provide the grant, they do the contracting, they do all of that because it's in their community, and that's something that they have firsthand knowledge of. We just make sure that we get a set of the drawings, we have some impact in what that project's going to be about, and more importantly, how it's going to affect upstream and downstream from that particular project.
What's great is we're like the conduit between the locals and the commission and even other entities, to make sure that there's funding available for important projects that they're interested in. But it has to be a project that's integral to our mission and what we're trying to accomplish as well. And I like to use the Hobart weir and the Hobart train as just a poster of what we do best, because here's a problem. Hobart has all these great ideas, and we come up with a different idea, and everybody embraced it, and we rebuilt that Hobart railroad bridge to really open up.
That was 100 years old.
Yeah, and basically it was like three circular holes that separated the Lake George and the dam area into the major flow into the little Calumet River through Deep River. Right. And we took care of that, and once we took care of that, then we moved on down to Lake Station and rebuilt the dam and created almost like a huge central park area that's just utilized, that people can walk across the Deep River over the where the weir is. They call it a weir. It's basically like a ladder or a step ladder all the way down. Takes the elevation from one point and down to the lead. And now you got an area that you can go fishing at, and then you can walk across the walking bridge there in Lake Station, and it takes you to, was it Bellaboo's?
Yeah.
And there's a nice trail there through there, and it's just a whole recreational aspect of what we try to accomplish in conjunction with solving a water problem, because since we rebuilt it, the railroad bridge and put the weir in, knock on wood. And Hobart's done a few other things. They did some work with Wisconsin Street Bridge, and we're looking at other things there. But the water is flowing the way it's supposed to, through the system, and that's what we want.
Yeah, I don't have to go to Purdue to know that water flows downhill, right? So, one of the challenges that we have, and it's been factored in by when the Corps did their design of the project, is Deep River that Tom was talking about, and where it comes through Lake Station, and it's called the confluence where it meets the Little Cal. And of course, where it meets the Little Cal is at the intersection of I-65 and the Borman Expressway. Well, from the state of Indiana's perspective, that's a pretty major issue as far as making sure that thing gets taken care of and make sure it continues to flow, pun intended, with traffic the way it's supposed to, not flow with water like it's not supposed to. So we spent a lot of time working on that, but that's one of the engineering challenges that I still struggle with, because when the water comes into the Little Cal from Deep River, a lot of that goes first. So the water coming from the west stops until that goes. That's why you see that big open field at I-65 in the Borman. Here, let me get my directions. The northwest corner of 65 in the Borman, that's why that's an open field, because that's designed to hold water while the Deep River clears through to head down towards the lake.
Think of it in terms of a high expressway where you got one lane going into 5 lanes, and things are going to slow down at a certain point, and the water has to get through. And then even worse, once it hits that, it's got to go out to Lake Michigan, and it funnels down into a small tributary to get out to the lake.
Right. So Dan Ripe loves getting telephone calls from me, because I'm challenged as I drive around the expressway, which I do a lot, and all the interchanges, if there's, ponding whatnot there. Well, that's dealing with INDOT, and that's dealing with all the other groups to be able to try to get that work done and try to make sure that gets eliminated, so there's one less challenge in getting on and off of the expressway, because at the end of the day, it's just a major source of commerce and economic vitality for the region, and it needs to flow a lot better than it does.
I drive that segment of the expressway daily, and when you're going from west to east, it starts about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and it is bumper to bumper, literally, from the state line, or even before that, Halstead Street to I-65. And the amount of traffic on the expressway, I can't even, it's hard for me to get my arms around the fact that it was closed for 4 days.
Right.
Where did all that traffic go? I mean, it's mind-boggling, folks, if you go through that stretch of highway. So one of the challenges for us is to make sure that the highway never closes ever again.
Not because of the river.
Not because of the river, but just in general, because the commerce that flows through there, through Illinois into Indiana, is very important to the region and to the state.
Hell, to the country. I mean, from 65 to, the state line, I mean, that's one of the busiest thoroughfares in the country. And, driving around the country in different places, you don't see as many truck traffic as you see on that segment of expressway. And, like Jim talks on the radio quite a bit, there's going to be some more modifications done. So as they close that down, we'll look to try to find some opportunities to try to do some of the things that we've talked about and trying to help them with that segment, because INDOT's got a lot of miles that they're responsible for, and we pay a lot more attention to the miles that are along the Little Cal River than most. So I think there's an opportunity there for...
How about a third lane down I-65?
Get me started.
That's a conversation that could happen for another day, probably for the next half hour.
But if this stuff interests you,
we're coming up on the end of it. So
yeah, we've been proud to put everything that we do onto the website, to the point where you can go and geek out on some of the old drawings and all the comp plans and what the Corps requires us to do, and some of the things that we address. And all of the meetings have been on there since day one. So it's to the point where it's a data dump now after all of these years, but it's also something we want to manage. So if somebody just wants to go to get a cursory review of the things that we've done, you at least can see some of the before and afters and what happens when you start paying attention to it, and in my opinion at least, properly apply the capital that you are responsible for.
We always tell people, if you see something, say something. You go on our website, littlecalriverbasinCommission.org, or you call the office, and it's easily Googled, and get a hold of Dan and just leave a message, because we got our crack staff of 2, our executive director and our office manager, and we get the job done with the 2 employees that we have, and we're like a model for everybody else, hopefully. Yeah. But that brings us to the end of the show, and want to thank you. Happy fall, and keep safe out there, and wishing everybody a great September, and we'll look forward to seeing you in October.
Make it a great week, everybody.